Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. I'm your host, Dave Ribeiro from SteelersSanctuary.com, and back with us once again is Ron Liplock. Ron, how you doing?
I am doing well, thanks. How are you guys doing?
Doing pretty well. We got a little NFL news today that's kind of interesting to someone like me, especially. A jury decided against the NFL in their DirecTV Sunday package thing. It ordered the league to pay $4.9 billion in
Times
damages.
three,
Times
because
three, that's right.
yeah.
So obviously this is going to be appealed and this could be drag on in court forever. But it's interesting, right? The NFL doesn't usually lose these kind of lawsuits. This is
It is, and I've been posting recently that I think the NFL has sort of a view of itself as sort of undefeatable, right? Like it could do, it's like it can do no wrong, and the money sort of grab is, for lack of a better way to say it, that it's been doing. I feel like it's going to backfire. I feel like everyone thinks the NFL is untouchable, and probably to some degree, but they're not completely invulnerable. And I think the continual using of different streams to deliver games, the continual idea that everything's about the money, I think fans are going to start to get a little frustrated, and I think that's starting to happen. I think this lawsuit is sort of indicative of an industry that's saying, you know what, cut it out. Figure this out, but don't alienate the fans as you do it. I hope so, because I think the NFL is endangering itself a little bit.
yeah, I agree. Some of the stuff with how many streaming services they're using now for games
Yeah,
and all this other stuff. When is too much? When is it too much?
yeah,
You've got, I mean, we've gone over it before, and it's been well documented on social media. You need like five streaming services to see every game. You need Peacock, Netflix, Amazon, the whole nine yards.
yeah.
YouTube TV. Someone like me who doesn't live in the Pittsburgh area, and you don't either.
Yeah.
I don't know if you are a Sunday Ticket subscriber, but I've been.
Oh,
No, you don't.
I don't. I don't. I'm fighting against it. I probably should, because I want to see my teams, but it's just like I feel like I don't know. I feel like at some point enough's enough, and there's and I work in the broadcasting industry, but I feel like I'm looking at it as a consumer, and I feel like there's got to be some wisdom here where the customer has to have some merit in the eyes of the NFL. You can't be untouchable, and I feel like the NFL is really, like I said, I feel like it's endangering itself, and I know everyone feels it's untouchable, but so did Major League Baseball, and I feel like baseball hit a wall. I'm not saying the
Yep.
NFL's going to hit that kind of wall, but I think it's going to lose fans.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. When I look back at, geez, Ron, how much money I've spent on the Sunday Ticket over the last 20 plus years,
Yeah,
it's almost scary. And it keeps going up. I think it was $100 when I first started doing it, and now it's up to like $300-400 with YouTube. That's per season. So it's, and not to mention, you know, I was a subscriber to DirecTV for all that time and really didn't want to be, but you kind of had to be. And the same thing with YouTube TV now. I had to switch to that, even though I don't really want it or need it other than to watch the Steelers games.
and the NFL doesn't. They're not in dire need of all. Look, I understand every business is in the business of making money. I understand that,
Yeah,
but I mean, and everyone can say, well, enough's never enough. But at some point, when you're alienating fans, and I think there's going to be that happening, then enough is, enough. And I don't understand their desire to alienate, or willingness to alienate fans. That's the one commodity they have, is a fan base. That's the one commodity they have. And I think they're at risk right now.
I agree. I agree. I think the final straw is this Peacock one because that's kind of a pay service
Yeah.
that you can get it and then cancel with the 7 free day trial. But a lot of people forget, and that's what they count on.
Well, of course, yeah.
They count on people forgetting to cancel the subscription and just you
Yeah.
know keeping it forever.
There's a lot of really, like, again, I'm in this industry, and there's a lot of really good studies about that forgetfulness, about the retention of people who sign up and then drop off. They were touting how many people signed off on to when they did the Netflix thing and all. But what they didn't talk about was the high rate of drop off afterwards. So, there's a short-term gain by these streaming services, and they're counting on that being stronger.
Mhm.
But the NFL is just in it for the money, and if the fans aren't going to view those games, the NFL is like, well, you have a choice, but they also have a choice to invest themselves in other leagues and invest themselves in other sports or in other things, because at some point, if you feel unwanted, you go, you find
Yeah,
something else.
yeah. I mean, if you think back to the '80s and you think back, baseball would be in the position it would be, where it's almost insignificant except for the hardcore baseball fans. It's not even.
And you don't see soccer doing this, not
No,
to my knowledge, anyway.
no. I don't know the way it is in Europe, but out here it's not like that. They just have a different way of going about things.
Yeah,
The NFL is just it's all about money, like you said. It's every last dollar. It's
yeah,
crazy. It really
yeah.
is crazy. All right, let's switch gears back to some Steelers talk. Russell Wilson was in social media circles working out with DK Metcalf this week. I hadn't realized how good of friendship they have. I guess they work out every year together. Um, Certainly interesting. If it has any sway in his buddy to get him to, I don't know, demand a trade or something like that. These.
If he had sway with the Seattle brass, that's one thing. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, true.
then he got Ayuk wearing the Pirates hat. I mean, I feel like we're being trolled half the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But it
It's
is interesting. I feel like something's got to break, right? I don't think they built this team to this point, invested, got Wilson in, did all the things they did to bring in all these guys to say, hey, look, we're going to leave this gaping hole at like
yeah,
one of the top premier spots on the roster. It just seems really strange. I do feel like something got screwed up along the way. Like they had a plan and it went awry. And so now they've got this gaping hole and they're really trying to figure out what to do about it. Um, and I don't think that's going to be left as is, but what it looks like, I don't know. I saw some people talking about Traylon Burks.
yeah. I
They have
mean,
a lot of guys like that on this roster. They've got a number of guys who had really, one-off good seasons, guys who had potential and are still building towards it or haven't built towards it. Burks is another guy like that. I don't know.
the only difference between Burks and those guys is he's still very young. He's only 2 years in the league.
Yeah,
I brought up his name a while ago because I think not so much that I want the Steelers to acquire him. He just seems to be the easiest one to acquire
yeah,
with some upside. You know what I'm saying? They've acquired two receivers in the offseason. The coach said he has to play special teams to earn a spot on the roster. They're clearly done with him.
yeah.
Maybe he's a bust at this point, and maybe it's not even worth picking him up. Um, he still was a first round pick. He's somewhat talented.
I just feel like he's going to be another guy in line. Like, they've got a lot of guys who have done it once or twice in a year, not in just like in 2021 or 2022. So, like, not many years ago, they're not older veteran guys. Like, a Van Jefferson, I feel, is a little bit like even he, like, he did it a few years ago. Like,
Yeah,
none
yeah,
of these guys in line are like super old veteran guys. They're not like the Allen Robinsons, right? Which is why I don't think they want to bring Michael Thomas in because he's more like the Allen Robinson mold that
yeah,
clearly didn't work. But I'm fine to bring him in if you're going to give like a sixth or seventh round pick for the guy, but he's not. I
yeah.
don't see him as being an answer, and if he's not an answer, they need a legit answer. And I'm not saying it has to be Ayuk or DK Metcalf, but they need an answer. They don't need another potential.
Speaking of Ayuk, did you see the stuff that came out with him today on the Pivot podcast with Ryan Clark?
Yeah,
Uh, he said if he's not with the 49ers, it's either the Commanders or the Steelers.
yeah,
I guess he's really close with the quarterback there in Washington.
yeah,
And if that doesn't work out, I'm starting to believe more and more that he's not going to be with the 49ers this year. Where he ends up, I'm not sure.
yeah.
I still don't know. I talked about this on the last podcast. I find it hard to believe the Steelers going to trade assets and then make him the highest paid player on the team, the second highest paid player on the team.
Yeah.
Um, it's not what they usually do. That's not the way they go about their business. Now it's a new regime. It's Omar now. It's Weidel. Maybe they're going to do it. I find it hard to believe.
Yeah, with Pickens waiting in the wings, to get paid as well. I
Yep.
do think I'm highly doubtful that they trade for a guy like Ayuk. I mean, not just because it's not what they do, it's just because structurally, I think it'll be really hard for them to make that work. And if you look at Washington, they have a much higher pick to play with, so they can give their second round pick, and it's probably going to be a better pick from most people's perspective than the Steelers' second round pick, right?
Yeah.
So they've
Yeah.
got they've got a better asset to trade. If that happens, I could see a guy like Cortland Sutton still being the guy. In the way the Steelers operate, there's going to be some guy no one's thought of that who's legit, but not like top tier that they'll bring in. And that's the way I see it. It's not going to be Ayuk. It's not going to be Sutton even. It's not going to be Metcalf. It's going to be someone else that's sort of like that grade B kind of player.
Yeah.
And they'll land someone like that. And that's kind of how I see it playing out.
Let me throw a name at you. I gave through this one at Dave last week or the week before.
Hmm?
Tyreek Hill. He's already made grumblings that he wants a new contract. They just paid their other wide receiver a substantial amount of money. They got to pay Tua this season a substantial amount of money. I could see him being on the block at some point.
If they're Here's what could happen is there could be that mid-season trade. I think that's when something like that would happen. I think Miami feels that they can win now, and so they're not going to trade a guy like Hill unless they're like 2-7 or something, right, or something like that, where they're out. And then they got to get rid of him then because you got to get something for him. But I don't think they would do that until then. And I could see the Steelers waiting till the trade deadline to make that wide receiver move that everyone wants them to make now. I could see
That's
that
risky.
happen.
That's
It's
risky.
yeah, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but I could see it
Yeah,
happen.
that's risky because if
Yeah,
this thing goes, if this offense struggles off out the gate, there's going to be a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure on Russell Wilson. A lot of pressure on Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith. This is
yeah,
everyone's expecting this to be a lot better.
yeah. And I do think people are going to have to be patient. I mean, it's a new offense, a new quarterback, a new offense. 3/5 of that offensive line in terms of
Yep.
people playing new positions is going to be new.
Yep.
So yeah, I think people have to be patient, and they're not going to be. I don't think it's going to be dynamic at the start. I think it's going to take some time for it to gel. So, people have to, it's going to be a little bit of some growing pains early on, I think. But here's another idea that if Washington does trade for Ayuk, let's say that happens. Now they've got another wide receiver in McLaurin.
I
Do
like
they
McLaurin.
then offload McLaurin to Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah,
So
I
I
could.
could see a domino effect like that maybe happening. And McLaurin's the kind of guy that would, he wouldn't command the salary that Ayuk, and he would be a good complement
Mhm.
to Pickens. I think there's a lot of value in that kind of trade. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the kind of like B plus receiver you were talking about that maybe we're not thinking about that could. I like McLaurin a lot.
Yeah,
McLaurin. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Of all the, because again, I think he's making 22 or 23 million a season, which is a bargain right now
yeah,
compared to some of these contracts. And he's a veteran guy to stick with Pickens. Yeah, I like that a lot. Like you said, they have to do something. They cannot. I
yeah.
think you're partially right, or not partially. You're definitely right that they could think they could wait till the trade deadline. I hope they don't. I really don't. I think
I agree because
terrible idea.
and once you and it's not like an offensive lineman where they also need time to gel, or a defensive lineman where you can kind of it's a little bit more plug and play. Um, wide receiver out there, you need timing, you need to get all that stuff,
Yeah,
you need playbook, all that. You can trade for a guy mid-season, but he's not going to be really integrated until at least a few weeks after that at best. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the idea either, but yeah, I could just see them saying, "Look, there's just no one right now.
yeah.
No
They
one."
may not have a choice, right? They
Yeah,
they might have to wait.
yeah,
Oof. Like all those things you brought up about the offensive line gelling and new coordinator. What does this offense look like if they don't go get a wide receiver? And what is it? Pat Frymuth's your second biggest weapon in the
A lot of
passing game.
throws, a lot of passes to the tight ends, a lot of three wide receiver, two tight end, tight end sets. What concerns me about Pickens is that he's a guy who needs a guy to take off the top. He doesn't have that huge speed. He's
Mhm.
so many other assets, but the speed isn't one of them. And if you're going to rely on the running game, you need someone who's going to back that safety up. I'm Pickens is a really interesting guy. I don't know if he's that kind of guy. So, what does that mean? Like they've got a lot of speed at this number two spot on the team, but there's no one that people are really overtly scared of it.
Yeah.
Except Austin, who's everyone says he's had a great camp, but they're not going to play him a lot because he doesn't block well as a 5'9" guy.
Yeah. Where
So
does he fit into this offense is always my question.
yeah, I think they're gonna
Because
have to design a lot for him. But when they want to run the ball a lot, and he's not going to start unless they're really willing to sacrifice something in the run game, which is clearly not the MO of what this team has been asking to do.
no.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how they, the one real answer at wide receiver is the least effective guy in the run game, which is where they're really leaning to. So it's just like, of course.
Yep. Yep. Um, yeah, I'm as this offseason rolled along and they made all their free agent signings, I started to get really, really optimistic.
Yeah.
But this second wide receiver thing, and maybe I'm making too big a deal of it, but it's the thing that's holding this team back. I don't know
Yeah.
if they can be successful unless they make a big deal. And then the after effect of that is if you trade your first round pick and things don't go well, and you're looking for a quarterback in in the 2024 draft, 25 draft. I'm sorry,
Dude.
you just lost all your ammo.
I don't think a number one pick is in the cards for this team to trade for a wide receiver. I really don't think they're going to do that. I
I
think,
hope they don't. I hope they don't.
especially if it's a guy like Ayuku, you got to pay. You can't give a number one pick and pay out 30 million plus a year. I just don't think that's. I don't think they're signing up for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right, and I think that's why they don't have a deal done
Yeah.
as of right now. They're holding out for that first round pick, and teams are holding out to get it. So I have pretty much a stalemate as we almost get into training camp in the next couple of weeks.
I was wondering too, like if all the talk on Austin was really like sort of beefing him up.
Going to drum up the trade value a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
I was curious about that, and then a second in Austin for an Ayuk or whatever it is the
Yeah.
more palatable. I don't know but right now we don't know. Yeah, right now they're clearly stuck. I mean, they're trying. I mean, there's too much smoke for us to understand that they are really for us not to understand they're really trying,
Yeah.
but they're just not able to do what they want to do for the price that people are clearly asking for.
I think multiple people have said, the rumors guys, that they had a deal almost done at the draft and
Yeah.
it fell through somehow. And I've seen people theorize that it was the 49ers thought they had Ayuk signed to a deal and they were ready to peddle Debo Samuel to the Steelers, and that fell through. So the trade fell through, and the Steelers were left holding the bag. I think there's some validity to that. I've heard a couple people say that, and that's probably what happened.
I just feel like looking back in hindsight, I know being what it is, I feel like the Steelers miscalculated, right? They didn't do anything at center. They could have signed a free agent at center early on, and then they could have gone for wide receiver round two, and they could have gotten a really good one at round two.
Mm-hmm.
Round one, they wanted their tackle, fine. But they waited a long time because they had to get the wide receiver. They let themselves they had too many needs going into the
Yep,
draft.
the draft, 100%.
And I feel like, for all the talk on how great the free agency in the offseason was, I don't think it was as great as people were saying it was. And I think it was good, but I feel like they had holes to fill and they didn't fill enough of them pre-draft. And now they're stuck in this position of where they couldn't get this thing done because they left a gaping hole and they didn't do enough to knock the other positions out so that they can fill that hole through the draft. So, or they could have signed a receiver. Receivers are hard to sign in free agency. They could have done a center in free agency. They could have tried to get a tackle in free agency. And I think they thought they had a center in free agency, and I think they lost that center when they thought they had them. I think there is something more to that. I think they felt they had someone close to being signed, and all of a sudden that fell through, and then
The guy
everything.
that signed with the Jaguars, right?
Yeah,
They thought they had to deal with. Yeah, I've been banging this drum all off season. They misjudged the center free agent market completely,
yeah,
completely,
I think they did.
and that put them in a hole,
Yeah,
in a real hole where they had, like you said, too many holes to fill in the draft. I think there was a little bit of preoccupation with trading for a receiver, and maybe not enough time looking at the free agent receiver. I know it wasn't a great free agent class, but I mean, look what you end up with, Van Jefferson. I
yeah,
mean, they were better receivers than Van Jefferson in free agency.
certainly,
Um,
certainly. I think it feels like they had a lot of near misses.
yep.
You know, like near miss at center, near miss at receiver. It feels like they honed in on some guys, felt like they were close, and then those things didn't happen. They didn't really have the plan Bs to get them resolved. And I think now they're in this position. Again, it's all speculation, but it feels like that. Where
It does definitely feel like that.
a lot of talk about they almost had the wide receiver in a trade. A lot of talk they almost had the center in free agency, and now
Yep.
they had to draft a center, which is great. I think Frazier's gonna be fantastic,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a second round pick, which is where that receiver could have come in, right? So it's not over. They can make some moves, but it is a little bit of a struggle now to figure out how they're going to make this happen.
I'm with you on the offseason. People just, I find it really strange that people are so quick to applaud everything that Omar Khan does
Yeah,
and ignore all the things that he, gets wrong. I mean, people are enamored with Omar Khan, and I get it. He's done some good things. He had a good draft last year. You know, he's made a couple of good trades. He traded up to get Broderick Jones and didn't give up a lot. Um, he's made some mistakes, and people don't want to seem to, they spent most of their money in free agency on an inside linebacker
yeah.
in a league where it doesn't spend on inside linebackers anymore. It's not the position of, and I
It,
know it's
I
crucial to
worry.
them.
I worry about Queen. I mean, I know I'm in the vast minority here, but I think Queen's good. I'm not. I don't know if he's not the second coming of Shazier, right? I mean, he
No,
really isn't, and
no,
at least he hasn't been. He's a
no,
guy
he's
who's
not
got
going to
all
be.
the assets, but he hasn't made the plays to back up the physical traits yet. He was better last year. Was really good last year. I get that, but he wasn't like he wasn't elite. Let's put it this way. And now they've got four really good linebackers and no wide receiver.
Yeah, exactly. And
So
and the Dante Jackson trade to me is a disaster. I
I'm
know.
not worried about that yet. That all goes to me. That goes to scouting. That goes to whether you feel like Dante Jackson, because look, they needed a corner too. So you
Yeah,
you
but
could say like corner or wide receiver. They needed both, and so they got their corner. Uh,
well, they didn't need wide receiver at the time. They created the hole by trading Deontay Johnson.
yeah, but they needed a corner, right? So they
Yeah,
swapped holes basically.
yeah,
But
basically, yeah,
I, but I think that the Dante Jackson guy is, we'll have to see on this. But I think they wanted him for 2 years. They do like this guy. We'll have to see how he plays out. Either we're going to really like this trade or we're really going to hate it. There's not going to be much of the middle ground there. But I think right now I'm going to defer to their scouting department, who says this is the guy they want. And if he plays like crap, then we'll say you screwed up and you were wrong. If he plays really well, then I don't have a problem with it because it's they upgraded a corner and they swapped needs. That's fine. My issue is what they did with the needs, regardless of what those needs were.
yeah. Um, I have a theory, and I think I brought this up to you before. I don't know if it's a scouting department said he was the cornerback they needed, or it was Mike Tomlin said this is the cornerback I needed. It's well documented. He loves Dante Jackson.
Yeah.
He's made a lot of comments about it. Um, we'll see. I'm not a fan. I I'm willing to give him a shot. We'll see.
Let's see. I
But
mean, we look. Steve Nelson was a guy that not a lot of people touted, and he played really well in Pittsburgh. I really liked that. And
yep,
I didn't. At the start, I didn't know a ton of Steve Nelson, but he played really well.
he was very solid
Yeah.
corner.
So I'm hoping he's a guy like that.
We have Steven Nelson, and then we have Patrick Peterson, a guy who they thought would fill a hole, and he
Well,
didn't do so
Peterson, they
well.
said. I mean, what's interesting about Peterson is Peterson was not even on their radar because they thought they were going to re-sign Sutton,
Yeah,
and he was like, and he was. It felt even in the way they just, well, the way Peterson described it, it felt like a knee-jerk reaction.
yeah, absolutely. It's one of those guys that Tomlin liked,
Yeah,
and they missed on Sutton. He said, "Let's go get Patrick Peterson."
yeah,
Yeah, I can see that
yeah.
just happened just like that. Let's go get Patrick Peterson.
But at least Jackson is a guy that they wanted for a while.
Yeah,
They put thought into in a trade. It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. It doesn't mean he's going to be great. It doesn't mean he won't be. It just means that at least there was a lot of thought and a lot of time put into that.
yeah,
And hopefully that equates
that's a
to,
good point. I mean, all he has to do is be better than the corners they had last year, which is a low bar.
well, I think he has to be as good as Deontay Johnson was a wide receiver, maybe. If you know,
Yeah, I
if
don't
you
know
want to
if
say like value for value,
yeah, I don't know if he's got that kind of ceiling.
yeah,
And then again, I get it. From everything we've heard, Deontay Johnson became a real pain in the ass
right.
and a real, bad guy in the locker room. So they had to make a move. I thought they could have gotten more for him. Honestly, again, I'm not a scout. I get it. They needed a corner. It feels like a mistake, and I hope I'm wrong, but it feels like a
What's
mistake.
odd to me about Johnson is if you can't get a lot for him, it's not because of how good he was. My take on it is just because the league knew that he had his off-field stuff. If that's the case, why put him with basically a second-year quarterback with CJ Stroud? That does not seem like the kind of marrying of young
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
to issue laden receiver, if that's how you want to call him, that you want, right? So I would be surprised at that.
And I don't think, Deontay Johnson didn't have that reputation coming into the league. Um,
Yeah,
I think it's born out of so much frustration out of Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett
yeah,
debacle, even Ben in his last season too. These players know they have a limited amount of time to make money and make their mark, and he squandered a good chunk of his prime under Matt Canada, and
yeah,
that's got to be frustrating. And when you go into that wide receiver, the meetings, and they're telling you the same thing you've done the last season and a half, and it hasn't worked.
yeah.
I can see that creating some,
Yeah, it's millions of dollars you're losing. I
yeah,
mean,
yes,
millions of dollars you're losing, and then we take it for granted as outside looking in, like, oh, what do they care? They're making 10 million, 8 million. What's another? What do they care? Kind of thing. But they care. It's a lot of money to be losing.
if Deontay Johnson played for the San Francisco 49ers, he'd be getting up for the $30 million a year contract. I'm pretty confident of that. And that
A lot
offense
more. Yeah,
with a legitimate quarterback,
yeah.
he's got that kind of talent. And sure, he does have his drops and does some wacky things on the field sometimes, but I think that's also born out of frustration. I don't
Yeah.
want to sound like a Deontay Johnson lawyer here, but I
Yeah, I
think
think it's a
they,
guy who's trying to do too much. You
yeah,
get limited opportunities and you want to make, you want to score 2 touchdowns every play kind of thing.
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I agree. I think it's a guy who's trying to do everything he can with every chance he gets because he doesn't get a lot of them. It doesn't make it okay necessarily, but it's understandable. So
Agreed. Not a heck of a lot going on this off season. So I wanted to take a look at the 2024 free agents after this season, and I want to get your take on: do you think the Steelers resign them? Do they get an extension before the season? We'll take them one at a time. Let's start with Russell Wilson. What's your take on what happens after this season with Russell Wilson?
I think it depends on how he plays. I think if he plays really well, they'll extend him, and I think Wilson would want to stay. If he does not play well, I think they'll sign Fields and find another veteran to back him up and have a competition.
The problem with that is what kind of money? If Russell Wilson, let's say they make the playoffs,
Yeah,
and he has 25 touchdowns, same what he did last year, basically, or
yeah.
maybe a little better. He's looking. What's the just above average quarterback money? 30-40 million dollars a season.
You have to pay someone, even if it's
Yeah,
Fields. You have to pay him. I mean, they're in an incredibly unique position, but not a sustainable one of having a
Yes.
quarterback who's on a minimum. This is like unheard of to have any veteran quarterback. I don't care if it's like Ryan
Oh
Fitzgerald,
yeah.
Ryan
Yeah,
Fitzpatrick. I mean,
you're absolutely right.
so that they got this guy in this position is unheard of, and it's a one-off no matter what happens.
Yeah.
And even if they draft a rookie quarterback, is going to get paid more than Wilson.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
so, I mean, no matter what they do, it's the cap hit is going to be much greater next year at the quarterback position, no matter what. So I
Yeah.
think, if Wilson has a good season, they'll probably try to sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal. If not, they'll try to sign Fields and draft a guy or sign another veteran or trade for someone or figure that out and create a solid competition with a really legit quarterback. Because they
Did you see
can't
the
go into next year. If Wilson flops and they don't make the playoffs this year, it's everyone's feet are on fire next year.
yeah, I mean, it's a free roll, like you said, but they've got a lot riding on him. If he flops and you have to go, what's the best case scenario? You have to go to Justin Fields at week 7, week 8. Is he going to be, that's not fair to him. It's a new offense, a new team, and now you got to drop him in halfway through the season.
I don't think it's unfair. I mean, he's in practice every day. He's got the playbook.
Yeah.
It's not like they just traded for him in midseason.
Yeah.
He's there. I don't think it's unfair. I just don't know if he's the guy, right?
I
I
mean,
mean,
it's,
where he is.
yeah, maybe I misspoke. Not unfair to him, but unfair to think that he'd be super successful
I don't know.
being
I
put
mean,
in that situation.
look at Mason Rudolph comes in and plays lights out, right? Lights
Yeah, but
out.
Mason was off with his team for like his whole
Yeah.
career, so he kind of knew the offense. And
I don't. I worry less about that. I worry more about just whether Fields is the guy, regardless of scenario.
yeah, well, that's my concern. Will he play enough for us to know? That's the other thing.
Right. Well, I think my take on is if he does is because Wilson has either gotten hurt or he's not the guy. In which case, we'll get enough time with Fields to know. And if we're not getting enough time for Fields to see Fields, it's because Wilson's playing so well that they're going to resign him.
Yeah, no,
So I worry less about that. My worry, frankly, is that neither one's the answer, and then they're back to square one next year, which is not that's highly possible.
yeah, it's a decent possibility that that ends up happening.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to Cam Hayward. I think we all expect him to get some kind of extension,
Yep.
although it seems to be getting a little more uh, tense, a little more combative. He's saying things, the Cleveland thing got everybody,
He
going
said it
on
was a
social media.
joke. I don't know if it was a statement that he's pulling back. It was sort of like a shot across the bow, and then he's like, "Oh wait, people really took that a lot
Yeah.
harder than I thought." So okay, it was a joke. I don't know.
I think that's kind of what happened.
Yeah,
I mean,
I think he stays.
Kim,
I really do. I think he stays. He does. I don't think he has an appetite for leaving. Look. I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I mean, he does have roots in Cleveland. His wife does as well. I wouldn't shock me if he did end up playing for Cleveland. If Cleveland was like on the cusp and they were looking really good, and
hmm,
maybe he does that, right? But I'd be shocked. I think he stays. He's just too important to the city, too important to the team, and they're not hugely deep at defensive line anyway.
no, I've brought this up with Dave a couple times. He's in the perfect position because they cannot afford to play this season without him. They
Yeah.
just can't. There's too much riding on this. There's nobody, they have Benton, but then, when you play 3 down linemen, which they do a lot, who's the third guy if Cam's not here?
Right. It's gonna be Lowry or
Yeah.
Loudermilk or
Yeah, those guys are not
hopefully
scouting.
Leal shows up. Yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah,
he's got the Steelers over a barrel. This is a great bargaining position for him. They need him for 2024.
they do, and I don't think look if he was going to hold out. I mean, he would already have done it. So he's going to play.
Yeah.
The question is he playing for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025? Right. I think that's the only question here.
No, I'm not. I think he will be. He'll play. He's not going to hold out. I agree.
So I just think I think they'll get something done, and I think that's a good faith move on his part. Right. He didn't have to show up. He could have
Yes,
said,
true.
"You know what? I'm a veteran player. I know the system. I've been here for years. I don't need to be here." And he showed up. That's look, he didn't have to do that.
Yep, 100%. Um, this one's easy the other way. I don't think Dan Moore will be in Pittsburgh in 2024, 25. I think this is his last season, unless something crazy happens, an injury or something like that.
If he comes back, like I was frustrated that Broderick Jones, like everyone was talking about how great the draft was last year, but I looked at like Washington, not a great impact. Broderick Jones, he was a good right tackle. I don't know if there was, he wasn't making the Pro Bowl, right?
No.
And he wasn't playing at the position that is the premier position when he drafts a guy at 17 at tackle. He wasn't playing left tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this year, I get that. But the jury's out on Broderick Jones, and the jury's out on Washington. I mean, we'll have to see. So, we're to your point earlier of like the high praise on Khan. I'm not saying these guys aren't going to be great. I'm just saying they haven't been yet, and we're already acting as if they've been.
Yeah.
So let's see.
Yeah. The Broderick Jones thing is just a mystery to me. How, unless he in practice he just hasn't been good. It's just a mystery how you don't. He's a number one pick. You traded up for him. He
Yeah.
should start week one. Move Dan Moore to right tackle
Or they had Chooks. They just
yeah. It's just it's bizarre to me. And then when Chooks did what he did, move Dan Moore to right tackle then.
well, they say that Moore was just not capable at right tackle, which is
I guess it's possible.
I get. Look, and sometimes guys, you develop. We've all gotten in the habit of saying rookie should start, rookie should start. That has, sometimes it's okay for them not to and to develop. You don't want to screw up guys, but my point was more just, the jury's out, right?
Yeah.
We're anointing someone. We're anointing a lot of players who haven't got there yet, and then they very well could, but they haven't yet. So let's see. Let's wait.
All right, next guy on my list, James Daniels. A year ago, I would have said this was a no-brainer. They were going to re-sign him. Now, after drafting McCormick and basically playing him at James Daniels' position in minicamp,
Yeah.
I think he's another one that's playing his last season in Pittsburgh.
Especially considering they're not going to have the luxury of that quarterback savings next
Yeah.
year. I think, yeah, he's in. Hayward's going to get a raise. They've got, we'll talk about Najee later and folks like
Mm-hmm.
that. I think, they got Pickens. There's a contract there that needs to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think that's a foregone conclusion. I think he's gone.
Absolutely.
He's been
Let's
steady
do.
too. It's a shame, but it is
Yeah,
what it
he's
is.
played pretty well for them. He's been their best. I mean, it's the best of a bad group, but still, he's been their best offensive line in the last couple of seasons. It was a
Yeah,
good signing.
yeah.
It was a pretty good signing by them. All right, let's do Najee Harris next. There's been a little bit of rumblings that maybe the Steelers might be interested in getting a long-term deal with him. I don't know. The money, the mileage they've already put on this poor guy. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
his rookie season was like record touches in a season. I wouldn't do it. It doesn't seem like the Steelers are going to do it, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's really going to come. I think the Steelers, the way they do a lot of this stuff, and I think they will double down doing it with him, is they're going to let they're going to let the league decide his value, and they're going to give him they're going to have their price set, and it's probably not going to be super high, and if people don't match that value, then the Steelers will resign him. But if he's getting better offers, they'll say good luck and all that. I think what I would love to see is a really big play running back. They don't have, right now, that's the one thing that still scares me about this offense is there's not a big play guy on this offense really like that could take a consistently be a threat, should I say, to take a 10, 20-yard pass and go the distance. I know
Yep.
Pickens has done it, but that was more of kind of like on slants where people took bad angles, whatever. I I don't think Pickens is going to be the guy that is going to consistently be going 70, 80 yards, whatever. I think they need a real big playmaker, and they don't have one in the backfield right now. So I'd love to see them go get someone who could do that in the backfield. Warren is, I think, capable, but not even he is not that guy, right? And if you're gonna have a run game, you're gonna want one of those guys to be able to break it like 80 yards and be a real threat to do it. So I'm curious to see if they can bring a guy like that in.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the kind of guy they like though, right? They keep bringing in these big bruising backs. It's like
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin's got a type at running back, and Najee Harris is that type, unfortunately. Um, Not unfortunately, he's a good back. I've killed him a couple times. I don't want to be the guy. He's last season really impressed me. He had some really good football games for
It's
this team.
interesting because he lost a lot of weight this offseason. So he's coming in, and maybe he will be that guy more so this, maybe more potential, but it never has been sort of, he's been the bruiser back. And,
Yeah,
you know, there's a, I get it, but I'd love to see more big plays out of this offense somewhere. And maybe Wilson's scrambling ability and all that will be able to generate more of that. But they've got to find it somewhere. And Austin, I worry that
yeah.
there's not a place for him due to the way this offensive scheme is run. But hopefully they'll find a place for him, and hopefully they'll use him. And if they could do that, then I think that alleviates the need to create those big plays elsewhere.
That's where Justin Fields kind of intrigues me, Ron. Is if he were the quarterback of this team, he's the guy that can break a 10
Yeah.
or 20 yard run and go 80 yards for the and give the defense something else to think about. Um, I go back and forth on who I'd rather see at quarterback, to be honest with you.
I wanted the guy. I mean, the problem with Fields is he's just not. I don't find him very accurate, and his fourth quarter stats are just they're really alarming.
Yeah, they really are.
So I look at that and like, especially for a team that relies a lot on defense and the run game to keep games close, you need a quarterback who can deliver in the fourth quarter in a close game, and
Yeah,
hasn't been that guy so far. So yeah, I'd rather go. Yeah, look, this is a team wanting to win now. Give me the guy who's done it.
yeah, yeah.
And if he proves he can't be that guy midseason, sure, replace him. But I would roll with Wilson, and I think they're probably feeling the same way.
It's odd with Russell Wilson, right? And not get on a tangent, but there are people in this league who are adamant that he is not a good quarterback. Mark Schlereth, again on his this week again, he does not think Russell Wilson's a good quarterback. I mean, he's in Denver. He saw him all season long. He called his toxic positivity is what he used on Russell Wilson.
I think a lot of people don't like Wilson because they think he's a weird guy, and he probably is a weird guy.
Yeah,
I think that means he's not a good quarterback. I don't know. I mean, look, his stats weren't bad last year, and I know that's mop up duty, whatever. But his stats still were twice as good as any of the Steelers quarterbacks we had last year, and we still made the playoffs last year. So I think there's a line between, okay, he's not this, he's not Mahomes. No one's feeling he is or that he needs to be.
No,
he just needs to be good, right? And I think there's this expectation like, oh, he's not a great quarterback anymore. I agree, he's not a great quarterback, but he's good. And with the way this team is structured, I think good is good enough.
Yeah, maybe good is good enough. Yeah.
If everything else is as it's supposed to be and as it's said to be with this defense and with the running game, if he's good, that's good enough.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I like the way you hash that out. One last guy for the free agents, Pat Freiermuth. I would have expected this to be done already. And I'm kind of surprised it's not.
Yeah, if the Steelers are smart, this is the move you make because he's buy low right now.
Yeah.
This is the year where if he doesn't have a big year, the Steelers are screwed because this offense is designed for that position. So this is if you're re-signing anyone before the season starts, maybe besides Hayward, that's the guy. You got to re-sign him. Or you're going tight end round 1 or 2 next year. I mean, or signing a big name free agent somewhere else. He's ranked low because the stats. He hasn't had many reps. He hasn't had many chances. Excuse me. This is the time, man. It's a no-brainer to me to make that deal.
So, is it Pat Freiermuth who doesn't want to sign a deal? Yeah,
I don't know
for him to wait.
Well,
you get the injury stuff and all that, but maybe he bets on himself and thinks he can have a big year in the Arthur Smith offense and
maybe. But if he doesn't, then Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a game of chicken, like all these negotiations, like just big games of chicken, right? And this
yeah,
is tough because Freiermuth, you're right, is probably betting on an offense geared towards him and a quarterback that's done it, has proven himself in that he could have that kind of season. And the Steelers are probably like, but you haven't done it quite yet, right? So
yep.
so I think that's gonna be a really interesting that's a more interesting negotiation to me than the Hayward one because of all the things that you're saying
Yep.
about does he wait or does he take the money now because no one's gonna happen for sure.
Be a ballsy move to bet on yourself and go
Yeah.
through the season. I mean, he's been injured
Yeah, it's that
a
too.
little bit, so it's risky. But everything we've read is that this Arthur Smith offense is just tailored for him, and that
Yeah.
he could have a. And like we said earlier in the podcast, there's not a lot of competition for catches out there after George Pickens, so he's going to be a focal point. Um, there's
And if
no
they
other
get a
tight
number
end.
two receiver, that's even better for him.
Yep, he could have a monster season if they don't trade for a wide receiver. Who
Yeah.
else are you going
If
to
they
throw to?
do, I think he could because I think
He'd end up being the slot
yeah,
for
he'd be
better.
the guy that yeah, he'd be the tight ends do well in this offense. And I think I think he would have a good year. I think it would make sense for him to resign because he hasn't proven himself yet. And you can't bank on a season that hasn't happened. And I think he'd be smart to take a good contract, but I think the Steelers would also be smart to give him one.
Yep, I agree. I think they should. I'm with you. They need to get this done
Yeah.
quickly. Even if you have to pay a little more than you want to. Uh,
Yeah.
Again, you brought in Arthur Smith. This is the guy you wanted. This is a tailor-made, like I said, offense for your tight end. And if he leaves, like you said, you know, there is
And
another tight end on this roster that's going to be a number one tight end.
I think unlike many positions, if he doesn't succeed, if he doesn't have the big numbers in this offense, my guess is it's not going to be because he did something bad. Because of his failings. I think it's just because Wilson wasn't
Quarterback.
playing well,
Yeah.
or something else was awry, or Smith wasn't doing the right things. Um, I think that I think that we see that he can do it. It's just a matter of the reps, a matter of the chances, should I say.
All right, Ron, that's all I got. That was a good conversation on the free agents. You got any new interviews you want to plug?
Yeah, just it's more the I've got Sammy Coates that I'll be talking that I will post soon. Just a lot of fun interviews. Just more of the same kind of stuff. Just a lot of good stories from players who are trying to make it. I spoke to a guy who played for Baltimore and Pittsburgh both today and yesterday. I did. And just a lot of fun stories about the different experiences that they've had across both teams. So we'll post those soon.
All right. Check out Steelers Takeaways if you haven't. Ron does a great job, gets a lot of great interviews. Just about every Steeler related guy you could possibly think of. Ron's already interviewed him. Thanks a lot. And thanks for listening to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. Until next time.
It's good seeing you.